Garrett again with Strongman, NSCA Strongman SIG. And today I'm talking to Rick Howard. He's the guru in long-term athletic development. He's written probably hundreds of articles and essays on the development of athletes from a concentrating on youth and how sports can enrich their lives, make them perform better as adults, so on and so forth. So, anyways, thanks for having me, or I guess I'm having you. I always mess that up. We're having each other.
Yeah, there you go. We're having a conversation.
Having a chat.
Yeah.
So first, again, go over real quick your educational background so that we know we need to listen to you. So.
All right. Well, I'll try to be convincing then. My undergraduate work was in physical education from Temple University, and my concentration was in exercise science, which was kind of an evolving field back then in terms of what you could actually do with it. And I ended up working in a couple personal training locations, managing a couple hotels, fitness centers, and things like that. It led me to a lot of opportunities. I ended up working for the school district of Philadelphia in the athletics and physical education office. They wanted me to go get a master's. So I got my master's in school leadership, which means I could technically complete the paperwork to be a principal in a school, but I wouldn't want to do that. That's not my wheelhouse. But it gave me really great insight into the educational system and some of the things that had been missing. Because at the same time, I was doing some volunteer work. We'd actually created, back when Arnold Schwarzenegger was the chair of the President's Council, he wanted to have a lot of local councils put together. So we created one in Philadelphia that I chaired, along with Dr. Nick Danubli, who was the orthopod for the 76ers. And so we would have different programs and projects that we would put together that got us involved with the schools. So we started to see the disparity in schools of opportunity between inner city schools and wealthy neighborhoods. There was a brand new sports facility that was built in the suburbs. What great access those kids had, but in Philly, they didn't have that access. So that really kind of got me down that path of really checking what's going on in the youth community and the youth world and what we could do to do better. So when I did my master's in school leadership, you got to see like some of the teaching instructional strategies, educational strategies for statistics, budgeting and things like that. So it was very helpful along with my experience within the school setting. Then one day, there was a big joke in Philly at the time, unfortunately, because we kept going through budget crises. And so they would lay off people at the main administration building. Well, my time came. So I got laid off from there and I said, you know what, I always wanted to do my doctorate. Now's a good time to do it. So I enrolled in Rocky Mountain University of Health Professions, which is out in Utah, but it was more of a blended program. So my concentration was in health promotion and wellness. That's what the major is for the program. So my doctor is actually a doctor of science of health science. So it's a little different from the path. Most people like to go the sports performance path. I really liked this path because it tied in a lot of the non-traditional aspects of health and well-being and wellness and all those, kumbaya terms that we always heard about. And, we first heard about them in the program, like everybody rolled their eyes and they're like, no, wait till you hear this. So like when you really did hear about it, it was eye-opening to see how we could really frame how we train people from cradle to grave using those concepts more than just focusing in on their sports performance. We're focusing in strictly on trying to keep them from being in a diseased state. So putting all that stuff together really helped shape where I was today. I was doing a lot of volunteer work at the time with the National Strength and Conditioning Association as well. And we were at a regional conference at Newman University, which is outside of Philadelphia, almost at the border of Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. People who are not from this area don't recognize how close together some of the states are up this way in the Mid-Atlantic region. So we had all these people from all over. And in New Jersey, we did a clinic over there, and Art Boss, who I train with now, he did a presentation on Strongman. This is going back, I don't know, like 2011, 2012, maybe. I was mesmerized. I'm like, this is really cool. So I said, how can I try this out? And he goes, hey, any Saturday you want to come to my house, come to my house. So me and another attendee went to his house in July, I think it was 2012 maybe, and we've been hooked ever since. So just about every Saturday, unless I'm presenting, traveling, or doing whatever, if at all possible, I'm over at Art's house in his adult playground of Strongman equipment. That's the short version.
That wasn't that long. That was maybe 2 minutes.
Everybody's like,
yeah,
what?
I know it's completely off topic, but I'm like down in Florida. It's like a good 6 hours before we see the non-Floridians.
Yeah, we do stuff like out in the Midwest even, and like if you don't have it in the populated part of the state, nobody can show up to see what you're doing. Whereas here, within the NSCA, we actually have 3 of the most popular states for membership within NSCA: Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Virginia.
Is that right?
Yeah. So it's interesting when you look at the states that have the most professional members. Florida's up there because it's so expansive.
Huge.
California and New York, of course, but then you wouldn't really think maybe of New Jersey, but New Jersey's on the list. Pennsylvania, Virginia are huge in terms of NSCA membership. So we always get pretty good draws for our conferences and stuff. A great involvement around here.
Wow, I wouldn't have guessed that. All right, so cool. And you also, speaking of NSCA, you wrote or co-wrote the NSCA stand on long-term athletic development, right?
Yeah, I did. It's interesting. Through all the research and everything that I was doing, there was a time within the NSA that they're looking to build and expand the special interest groups, and they would have volunteer meetings to see who would want to try to do something. So I said, wow, we should really do one on youth. There wasn't a whole lot going on in the youth market within NSCA. So we pitched it, proposed it. We got the signatures we needed. We actually brought in the President's Council and Shape America. At that time was NASP.
Really? Shape America.
Yeah, sport and physical. So those leaders came in. We had conversations about working together, doing different things. The SIG was approved. We started having calls and meetings and putting on pre-conference workshops and everything. Well, then it got to the point where they were looking to expand on the position statement idea at NSCA. So they're looking at like the top 10 position statements that they might want to have. Youth made the list, and particularly looking at long-term athletic development was really becoming a hot topic at that time. It's like around 2014, 2015, I guess. So when we looked at it, we said, well, that's what we want to do. So we pitched it to the research committee that we wanted to have this LTAD position statement. And they're like, we don't know if there's enough evidence for that. I said, but tell you what, why don't you write an invited review for the Journal of Strength and Conditioning Research of what we do know, and then we'll see what we find from there. So like, okay. So we wrote this nice, big, comprehensive article and realized that it really needed 2 parts. That what we had written was what was out there, but there was no solution to it. So, just writing everything that's out there. Well, now what are you going to do? We said, we really want this to be a 2-part article. Would you possibly accept it as that? And they said, sure, yes, we will. So our invited review turned out to be a 2-parter. That was back in 2015 that got published. And then after that happened, then we got permission when they were looking at which position statements we're going to get out there. They approved that. Dr. Rodri Lloyd over in the UK was the principal author. He had done a lot of the preliminary research, put together his youth development model for kids, along with Dr. John Oliver over in the UK too. Avery Fagenbaum is recognized internationally as the top pediatric exercise researcher, was part of that paper. So it was almost a proverbial who's who of authors. And then it was me. I hadn't done a lot of research per se, but, I was always the voice out there really promoting the whole idea of getting the information out to the people. So they included me in the writing of the paper, which was pretty cool. So got to see how that process worked. And so it was neat to get the position statement out there, which we created 10 pillars to help people understand what needed to happen in a long-term athletic development program. And what you mentioned earlier was spot on too, because it came from the youth special interest group, it kind of focused on youth, and all of the papers had done that up until then. As we got out and started talking about it, like, wow, this is really a concept that's cradle to grave. It's not just for youth. The program that started in Canada, they looked at it as a playground to the podium model. So they're looking to increase their Olympic medals. So they figured out, how do we actually get more kids involved earlier on to really help to build our talent pool so that we have more Olympic hopefuls. So when they put it together that way, knowing that most Olympic athletes peak somewhere in the mid to late 20s typically, that age is going up a little bit now, interestingly as well. So they started looking at how they could do that. We looked at it too, but then started saying, wow, this really should expand much farther than that. So that's kind of what brings us to where we are today, I think.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so because we had chatted before, so in your view, so long-term athletic development actually is the whole spectrum, right? You have your youth, and then you have adolescents, and then you have teenagers, then adults, right?
And older adults.
And older, and then elderly, and then the grave, I guess.
Yeah. Somebody said we had to figure out a better term for that. The cradle's okay, but grave, that's really the end point. Like, so how are we doing the active part of it? What do we call that? And I'm like, all right, well, we'll figure that out down the road. But yeah, initially it was just really look for the youth athletic market, maybe through college, maybe through early Olympic development, maybe whatever the peak activity was. And then it was just that you would give back to the sports world when you retired from your sports participation, either as a coach or a volunteer, league administrator or whatever. So this kind of took it to that next step and said, no, we really need to start figuring out, we're putting these papers together now of what does it look like for parents and kids to work together on LTAD. We've always separated out each of our audiences, but not how they interact with one another to really help be physically active across the lifespan.
Right. And so from your perspective, our athletic development, we should almost look at it as from what I've read, as like our life is one big like macro cycle, right? You're beginning. So I want to go into this a little bit because
I'm stealing that, by the way. I'm stealing that. I'm stealing that.
You just quote me.
Yeah, there you go.
Use my initials, GMR.
There you go.
And so from what I've read on your stuff, you think that kind of we've been doing youth sports the wrong way. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you think we've been, like, again, if we're looking at it as this macro cycle, you think we've been using like way too much specificity as youth, right?
It's better to write it than it is to say it, isn't it?
This is the type. I'm gonna edit that out and type
there you
it.
Go.
Yeah. And so, so you think like during our youth, we shouldn't be so concerned with children learning how to hit home runs or kick a field goal or any of that. This stuff is fine and dandy, but you think we've been putting too much emphasis on that, right? You believe we need to put more emphasis on one, just having fun, body control, neuromuscular control, so on and so forth.
Yeah, we have that mantra that kids are not miniature adults, but that's exactly what our youth sports programs are. So I'd love to use the example of Little League Baseball because it came from up in this part of the country where I am, right in Pennsylvania. So it was created by this guy whose nephews came to visit him. They didn't know how to play baseball, and their uncle was like, "Oh my God, how could you not know?" So, rather than say, "Hey, let's go out and I'll show you how to hit and field, throw different size balls and stuff," he goes, "When you come back next year, I'm going to teach you baseball." This guy spent the whole year with a friend of his creating what baseball would look like for kids. So what did he do? He made the ball smaller, gloves smaller. He made the diamond smaller, so the distance between the bases was smaller, fewer innings. So we just watered down the adult model, which is what we always say we shouldn't do for kids, but we never blinked an eye or thought twice about doing that for youth sports. So Pop Warner football also came from Pennsylvania. So same thing. It's kind of set up the same way. It's just a watered down version. But here you have these peewee 8-year-olds running on a 100-yard football field. So they didn't water down the field for that one. Same thing with soccer. They would still use the same size pitch for soccer. So all of a sudden, USA Hockey has this fantastic video that they put together so that adults could get a perspective of an 8-year-old out on the rink, on the ice. And so they did like a scaled version for adults, what it would look like. The goalie's just standing there and he's looking around how massive this area is around his head, of how easy it is to score a goal because you don't take up much room. The athletes were all getting exhausted just skating up and down the ice because of how big it was. Well, from an adult perspective, we don't see that. But from a kid's perspective, it's massive. And so at the same time, if you're just learning a skill and you have to apply that on this huge surface, it doesn't work so well. So by using that watered down model, it doesn't really help all kids to develop. We said we want to fill the talent pool, but we really aren't. We're just using those kids who are kind of ahead of the developmental continuum, who get it earliest, and hoping that they won't burn out so that we can keep playing those so we look like we're really good coaches, rather than saying, why don't we give them all the skills? So for baseball, why don't we say, let's teach kids how to throw all different size and feel of balls, either at standing targets, moving targets, different types of games, to really demonstrate, kind of like old school field day, really demonstrating some of those types of opportunities they could have to move, solve movement problems and do what they need to do. And you could certainly bring it back to a game type situation. But if you look like in inner cities and things too, you're landlocked. So there aren't a lot of fields. So everybody wants to play baseball in the spring. So now you have like these 8 and 10-year-olds who are just looking for a field. And so they're playing baseball like 7 o'clock at night to get the field because, the older kids get the premier times. So it doesn't make any sense that way either, because they're supposed to be home relaxing, doing the homework, playing with friends, but that's the time they get to go use the baseball diamond. So there are a lot of things that we could really fix just to make it more exciting. Because if you look at it too, 70% of kids are dropping out of youth sports by the time they're 13. And that data is starting to gravitate closer to age 11. So they're dropping out even earlier.
Oh, really?
Hopefully you would think that everything that we know about how to make kids enjoy things, as they say, the number one reason they play sports is because it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
So Canadian Sport for Life actually just put out an excellent infographic on those 4 key elements of fun, in terms of learning new sports and skills, being with friends and all these different things. But we're not doing that. We're just, wanting to see who's going to win the U12 championship. That's not even on the top 10 list for kids. The most recent lists that are done, that comes in like number 41 and 42.
Yeah, I think I saw you post that. I went over. I think it's because the more I was reading your stuff, I think probably in the rest of the world, but I'm not going to speak for the rest of the world, so I'll speak for America. Mm-hmm. We have this weird type of like I remember we would always going out to recess. Just you didn't have to ask us, right? we were dying to get it. Or on the weekends, maybe not so much anymore, but back in the day, we would, on the weekends we would go out and we'd go make forts and climb trees and climb and swing on ropes and all that stuff. Now growing up, like we love playing paintball and all this good stuff.
Yeah.
Capture the flag.
Mm-hmm.
But in America, it's almost like as if that's not sports,
No.
Like so you have to play with rules and you have to score. And I get that from that, if you're trying to develop skills or whatever, but from just a health perspective, it doesn't matter. Right. And so I think, do you think that's probably a good, fair assessment? It's almost like, unless someone's keeping score, you're not doing sports.
Well, and you're exactly right. It's not just in America either, but when you look at LTAD and the athlete part of it or athletic part, the definition of that is always narrowed down into an elite performer. So if you're not in that elite or that travel league or whatever it is, you're not really an athlete. Like recreational sports even, they're kind of like the ugly stepchild anymore. While you're not in the elite travel program or the premier high school program, you're just over there playing rec ball. You're not even an athlete anymore, right? So it's gotten to that point, unfortunately, whereas all those other great games that we played and invented and learned how to really learn all those skills and solve those movement problems, those were the best because there were so many problems to solve. Here in what we're doing with kids now, it's the same repetitive problems. So they get really good at those. But then if you put them in a different scenario or in a different sport, they don't know how to translate over that well with that. So you get those kids who might not want to continue to participate in that sport, but they haven't really learned the skill set to go do something else. Yeah. So they tend to be part of that sedentary population for the rest of their lives, unfortunately.
Yeah, right. I mean, you'd be pretty hard pressed to find a 8-year-old and be like, you're going to absolutely love baseball when you're 20. So we're going to start training you now for baseball.
That's right. To be fair, of course, there are some that do, so, there's a guy from down in Florida, actually had a conversation with. It's twin girls who just love playing softball. And that's what they wanted to do. They're in 3rd grade. They wanted to just keep playing softball. I'm like, great. Integrate different games and activities in their warm up. Mm-hmm. Call the soccer team over, have a challenge with them just so you start integrating that. If they want to keep playing baseball, if that's what they really like and want to do, but give them the other skill sets sometime within your time together so that when they want to do something else, or maybe they want to, it would work. The issue you have like with Olympic developmental sports is, they make their money too, like all the for-profit sports organizations. If you don't get kids to continue to play that particular sport, that's your revenue stream. So to say, all right, we're only going to keep you for these 2 or 3 months, to play volleyball, you go on off for the rest of the year and go do something else. And, we'll see you next March. They can't risk that. So rather than create like a multi-sport league, which is starting to get more and more popular, 241 Sports does a great job across the country, putting together multi-sport camps. So the kids learn different sports and activities within that same period, rather than just focusing on one and only one sport.
Right. Yeah. Obviously I do strongman, but I also did triathlons. That was one of the cool things. Like you got to swim, you got to run, you got to cycle.
Yep.
Three really very different sports. But there was that cross training aspect. And then if you wanted to, I can go do a cycling race. I could go run a marathon.
Right.
Not anymore, but I could go do endurance swim. But just those three, you have this huge skill set.
Right. Yep.
We look at triathlon as one sport, but it's three sports that you just do back to back. Right?
Exactly. Yep.
So let's go back a little bit. And then we're going to jump into strongman. So for youth, what if you could break it down? Like I kind of mentioned, like your neuromuscular system, body movement. What would say like your top three goals for developing youth? Like what are your three outcomes you want to see happen?
And I think that's a great question. And a lot of it comes from that Lloyd and Oliver paper I was talking about too, for positive youth development and how they put their model together. They found that all of those attributes are trainable across childhood and adolescence. So there are many who thought that, if you don't try to develop a particular skill within a certain window of opportunity, they weren't going to get it. But, take speed, for example, they found that there might be sensitive periods where kids might develop speed better. But because of the overall growth and development of kids, you don't know if they're at that level at that time. So why not provide opportunities for speed all ages, from the time kids start running and playing age 4 or 5 all the way through in adulthood. How many adults do you see sprint anymore? And we used to chase each other all over town, right? Now, if we're not just doing that lazy jogging pace, we're usually not out there moving much in that direction. So why not? Why did adults stop playing games? So that's my big question now. So that's the first thing, is to continue to develop muscle strength, fundamental motor skills. Kids learn those, and they need to be relatively proficient at those by about 5th grade, around 10 to 12 years old, roughly. But if they haven't gotten that, keep after it. They'll get it. But then when they hit their growth spurt, they're going to be in a whole different body. So we need to retrain that, and we don't. We stop by 4th or 5th grade going through the motor skills, running, skipping, hopping, jogging, catching, throwing, rolling, landing, stopping. So it's no surprise that a lot of the injuries in sports right now are for the inability to stop and change direction. So we don't have that body control anymore to do that. So it's important to put all of those pieces into our training puzzle to keep working on all of the fundamental motor skills, the ones that you use in the sport that you're doing and the ones that you're not getting, to make sure you stay well rounded. That's the first one. The second one, which is certainly central to this conversation, is muscle strength, which that was kind of like the ugly stepchild of fitness attributes for a number of years, but it's getting much, much more research backing to it. Grip strength is now becoming a key indicator of longevity as well. So it's cool to see a lot of this stuff coming out that, my mantra is you can't go wrong getting strong. Nobody ever said, gosh, I was just too strong. I wish I hadn't gotten strong when I was younger. It's good. It helps. It's also, they're linked to the motor skills. So if you watch somebody lunging, for example, is it because they don't have the motor pattern to lunge, or is it because they don't have the strength to perform the movement correctly? So you have to go back and put those two pieces together, train the movement and make them strong enough to be able to do it. And that's why it's such a key for being able to improve performance and reduce the risk of injury. The third piece, of course, would be to make it fun. So my whole idea for that is we have our physical activity pyramid. What's at the base of the pyramid though? Chores, helping out around the house, parking your car farther away, like all these things that nobody likes. So why would you make that the base? So
I get what coaches are saying, but it's like, can we come up with something a little bit more fun than parking farther? So I gotta walk in the hot ass sun in South Florida.
Exactly right. Yeah, with all the stuff you're taking into the office with you, and now you have to walk it up 3 flights of stairs after you get it, 3 extra blocks to your destination. And they show those great videos of people going to the gym and they're all cutting each other off to get that spot right in the front of the gym, right? So yeah, there's something to that. But why not make the base of the pyramid what you love to do, and then design the rest of the things you need to balance your overall fitness package in support of that. So, you know, strongman's a great example. Like, you know, we're not known for doing a lot of cardio, but we know how important it is for recovery. We know a lot of the events in strongman require a lot of muscle endurance and cardiovascular endurance. So we do need to train it. So why not integrate it into something that you love to do rather than put in things that nobody wants to do and then make that the base? It doesn't make any sense.
Right. Yeah. I was talking to someone they need their cardio up, so they need to run. And they're like, oh, I just hate running. I said, well, like, you don't need to run then. That's amazing because you can go cycle. Yeah, I'm a bigger guy, so I'm a big fan of cycling. Go cycle.
Right.
Oh, I don't have a bike. All right, cool. Like, go swimming. Yeah. Oh, I don't have a swim. It's like, all right, go get on the stair climber. Go, like there's other ways. Like there's this is kind of pigeonholed, but there's this, I can only improve my cardio with running. And like,
that's our mentality in the US.
Find something you like to do to improve it. Like, I have this thing with walking. I don't like walking. If I have my dog with me, I'll go walk wherever. Like,
right, exactly.
Have some fun.
So put it together that way. Or what we do even for strongman training, do medleys.
Yeah.
I mean, how fun is that? But then you get to tax your neuromuscular system, your cardiovascular system by doing different things for different lengths of time. And so, we had done a lot of that in our training. And when I did my stress test, I actually, for my age, I'm in really good cardiovascular shape. And they're like, well, what do you do for cardiovascular work? I'm like, medleys. But it worked. It's a version of high intensity interval training.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of I don't want to go too far down this road, but I've been doing a lot of EMOMs. Like 3RM, 10-minute.
Wow, brutal.
Brutal. Absolutely. 10 minutes and you're done.
Yeah.
Absolutely brutal.
But that just goes to show there's so many different ways, but we just think that there's only one or two methods to do any of this stuff. Like, you're not going to be an elite athlete unless you start playing their sport at age 6, because they look at that 10,000 hour rule that said, if you want to be an elite performer, you'd had to put in your 10,000 hours. They did the math, right? 3 days a week, 3 or 4 hours a day. And they went calculated like, wow, we got to start by age 6. So you won't have enough time to get your college scholarship. So is
that number legit, or is it kind of like the 10,000 steps where they just kind of get a random number and say this sounds right?
Well, the 10,000 hour rule was kind of misinterpreted from some of the research data that was out there. There are all different performers. There was a follow-up book that came out from that I could picture it, but I can't put my finger on the name of it. It'll come back to me eventually. But he showed that there were elite performers. There's one guy who was a high jumper. First time he high jumped, he had like the second highest jump in his school. And by the time his third or fourth competition, he was already at the elite level. So it varies across skills and across people. But what they did find was that for musicians and other performers and some athletes, that it did take, a serious amount of practice to really develop your skills. But for a lot of skills, it could be only 600 hours. So you do need to practice, and there is something there. Your 10,000 steps was interesting because that research was originally done on Amish people in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, because they were trying to figure out why is it that Amish people eat meat and potatoes and gravy, all the things at that time you said, oh, you shouldn't eat those are so bad for you. But have you ever seen an overweight Amish person? Not usually. So they figured out, they went 10,000 steps every day. Actually, they went 20,000 steps. It was like, there's no way we're getting people to do 20,000. We'll start with 10. What they failed to mention was those people work their butts off. They're working all day. They're not just walking steps. They're pushing a plow. They're with the horses. They're carrying buckets. So they're doing Amish strongman.
Yeah. And 10,000 steps. If you're working, I'm not going to go down that road.
Yeah, we could talk about
it. Get caught up. All right, so let's backtrack. No more Amish talk. Nothing against Amish.
No, it works for them, and there's something to look at. They work.
Yeah. All right, so anyways, let's transition.